Hey everyone, Happy New Year Magic players. It is another modern meta breakdown video, and this time we're going to be diving into 2020. We were all set and ready to talk about how Urza's still the #1 deck, but we're not going to be talking about Urza today. We're going to be talking about Yawgmoth today. And the main reason about that is there was a ban announcement at the beginning of the year. They said, listen, Oko was kind of a mistake. We have banned him from every format pretty much now, so let's, realize that when he's seeing play in almost every modern deck that's placing in the top 16, top 32 really, he's a little bit too strong. So Oko is now banned from modern, and at the same time they said, this Urza stuff, we don't want it to just still continue to be the only deck to play in modern. Let's kind of get rid of Mox. Just that free mana, acceleration, just meh. So we'll see if any of the other decks that ran Mox Opal, that's our affinity stuff, that basically was running around that artifacts shenanigans that people would do, if any of those can be able to stabilize post this banning of Mox Opal. That's going to be the real question. It's going to be very challenging because part of the benefit of it is just how quickly you can go. Now, I wouldn't be upset if they unbanned some of the artifact lands then. Now that Mox Opal's gone and things like that, do you really need to worry about the artifacts lands? Probably with Arcbound, but not as much compared to some of the other stuff people can do. But still, at the same time, our Microsynth Lattice was banned. If you guys don't remember, we talked about that in our previous episode where we talked about a way to lock your opponent out with Karn the Great Creator when we talked about some of the Tron stuff. I'm indifferent about it. Preventing people from playing Magic can be frustrating, so I can understand why they wanted to ban it. So, it is what it is. But that's not our main focus today. We just wanted to highlight it because it is 2020. Let's get going with the year and start talking about some fun decks. I wanted to highlight this deck in particular, mainly because when Urza was still running around and being one of the top decks, along with Amulet Titan, some of the other decks that have just kind of rose to the top, having Oko to kind of help power them up a little bit more. This deck was able to place first right before the banning. So I figured this would be the perfect deck to talk about post-banning because, hey, it's still going to be a strong deck. So, Yawgmoth. All right, so this deck might seem a little bit weird at first because it is a powerful strategy revolving around your creatures and the synergy that it works well with Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth is like your engine that you have, and all of your other creatures is the fuel that makes him work. So we're going to go through and talk a little bit about what he does and why he's so powerful and why there's decks that are built around. Just like how Urza is so powerful, but powerful for other reasons, Yawgmoth is just as powerful in the right hands and right deck. So protection from humans. So if we see a rise up in those human strategies and those lists start climbing their way back up, now that Urza's gone, at least Yawgmoth can help at least mitigate some of that potential aggro damage coming his way. And you can just kind of start pinging off some of those creatures. So as long as Yawgmoth is around, it's going to be harder for those human lists to kind of stick to it. So that you get to pay 1 life, sack another creature, and you get to put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and then you get to draw a card. So you get that kind of card advantage off of sacrificing your own stuff. You can also pay double black to discard a card and proliferate as well. So if you're saying, hey, you know what, you have something that's bigger than a 1/1, maybe I can discard a few cards to just finish it off kind of thing. Just do some mess around shenanigans in that regard. So this deck in particular is all about assembling undying creatures. So let's talk about the kind of, there's 3 main ones, but we're going to break it up into 2 different categories for it. The first one that we have to deal with is just kind of our early drops. Bum, bum, bum. And that would be our Young Wolf and our Strangleroot Geist. So this list that we're seeing here does run 4 Strangleroot Geist and 4 Young Wolf because that is kind of the first kind of enabler that you're going to want to try to do with the deck. As you can see, the Undying text that is written down there, it's whenever this creature dies, if it has no +1 counter on it, you get to return it to the battlefield under its owner control with a +1 counter. Seems pretty good, especially because if you have more than one creature that's out, you can be able to use Yawgmoth's ability to put a -1 counter on one of your undying creatures and be able to just sack it again. And just kind of, let's just move counters around for a little bit, guys. Yeah, that seems fun. So that's just a nice little strategy that you can be able to think about with the list. It does have some mana ramp to go along with our undying creatures, so we'll hop back over to the undying creatures in a minute, but I want to talk through some of our ramp in this deck. So we've got Birds of Paradise playset that is in here. Noble Hierarch is in here as well, basically just kind of helping this out. The Undying, or not Undying, the Exalted trigger can become relevant if you're just swinging in with one creature, but really it's, hey, let's kind of be focused on our ramp up. We've also got Wall of Roots, and there's a reason we're running Wall of Roots in this list over some other mana accelerators that exist out there, and that is because of our lovely little search effects. And Court of Calling is phenomenal with Wall of Roots. Not only can you put a -0/-1 counter on Wall of Roots to be able to get green mana, then you can tap it. So you basically get double mana out of it for casting Court of Calling. So really important if you're going to be running that. Eldritch Evolution is great in this sort of list because you are sacking a creature to get something bigger. It's a great way to be able to kind of find Yawgmoth here because it's going to be 2 more than what you sacrifice. So if you have a Strangleroot Geist, let's sack it. Cool, get Yawgmoth. Strangleroot Geist comes back with that Undying trigger, and you're just kind of flowing along, getting things assembled the way that you want to. So really, really powerful way to kind of assemble your creature base and get things going with these powerful search spells that exist. And per usual, we've got to have Once Upon a Time. All right, it's just so good. Casting stuff for free, everybody loves it, and you can be able to find creatures and land. So if you're like, ooh, I am kind of hurting on a land, I missed my land drop, I'm at 3 mana, I really need that 4th mana to be able to get up to Yawgmoth and be able to cast it because for whatever reason I don't have any search effects other than Once Upon a Time. It's just nice utility card early on in the game or even later in the game. Definitely worth it in this sort of list. Playset 100%. That's kind of our main stuff. Oh, Dryad Arbor's in here too. Can't go wrong with Dryad Arbor. It's important for the ability to be a creature so you can be able to interact and get him out early if you need to. You can also be able to sack it with Yawgmoth and be able to kind of combo off like that. I've seen people be able to cord for 3. Essentially, they pay the 3 green and X is 0, and they just find Dryad Arbor as just a way to accelerate. You really have to be careful doing that against specific decks. But if you know you're not facing down a Lightning Bolt deck or things like that, it's easy to be able to accelerate quicker that way. So very, very nice way that works out. We've got our Cavalier in here as well as kind of our top end. If things don't work out as well with Yawgmoth and, you know, if the game goes a little bit longer, sweet. We've got kind of a nice way to kind of power things through in the end, right? He's 4/5. He's got lifelink, so he's pretty powerful by himself, and he gets to bring something back, right? So when he enters the battlefield, you can sack another creature. When you do, destroy target creature an opponent controls. And then if he dies, you get to return a creature card from your graveyard with converted mana cost 3 or less to the battlefield, which, you know, there's some powerful stuff that costs 3 or less in this deck. Now let's move these out of our way for a second. Bam, bam. Now, we know how Yawgmoth works. We know there is the Undying that combos very well with it. There's another piece of the deck that kind of goes along with that secondary Undying stuff that I hadn't talked about yet for the list, so I'll talk about that now. It's our Drain strategy, which is put into place with Blood Artist and Geralf's Messenger. Now, these 2 creatures here are kind of, I can be able to just drain you down. If things stalemate, or if I get this out early enough and I'm doing all this comboing and sacrificing with Yawgmoth, you're just going to be taking damage constantly. So Blood Artist is whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies. This includes your opponent's creatures. So that is the main reason why you are running him over something like Zulaport Cutthroat, which is only your creatures. So Blood Artist, every creature, whenever any creature dies, that target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Does not get away, and you cannot get past Leyline of Sanctity with Blood Artist, so just be aware of that if you are trying to play that and you face down something scary like a Leyline, which there's not as many running around, but just kind of heads up for everybody out there considering the deck, or if you play against this deck, that's a one way to kind of help you deal with this sort of drain effect from Blood Artist. The other is Drolf's Messenger, which enters tapped, not that big a deal. It's a 3/2, does have that Undying that we talked about, and when he enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 2 life. So, nice way to go about doing things. Again, you can be able to use that Yawgmoth's ability to sack a creature, put a -1 counter on Drolf's Messenger after he's done the Undying, and then if he dies again, boom, he comes back, new +1, another 2 life get drained off. So it's a nice way to kind of speed up a clock. Very powerful creatures that are in here with the backing of Yawgmoth. By themselves, they're not that scary. Yes, Undying can be annoying. Oh, I have to kill this creature, and now he's back. I got to kill him again, right? If you're limited on the amount of removal your deck has, that can be the hard part, and you really have to decide when to use specific stuff. Really, your main target if you're fighting against this deck is going for Yawgmoth. He's the enabler that makes these creatures so good. Without him, they're just Undying creatures, and yes, you have to spend more resources to kill them, but the Undying constantly, that's the scary part. So let's move these drain effects out of our way. Let's keep that up for now. I like those 2 cards. Let's talk land base real quick, talk about the sideboard, and kind of go over a little bit more details about the deck as we kind of progress through. Now, you notice that there was a lot of creatures that are costing multiple black mana to cast. Cavalier is one of those. We've also got our Drolf's Messenger as another one. So having Urborg in there, key to helping your deck be able to cast the spells at once. Being able to tap even a fetch land for a swamp, A+. We need that. Verdant Catacombs in here. We've got our Twilight Mire, and there's a reason there are 4 in here. When we talked about how hard it might be to cast something like Drolf's Messenger, right? Cavalier, we need to have that ability to cycle and filter our mana base to the way that we want. So having a playset in there is actually extremely important for this particular deck. Overgrown Tomb, only need 2. You can adjust numbers as well if you're like, you know what, I don't really have Blooming Marsh. You can run more Overgrown. It's basically, you know, you're going to be able to run the lands that you need to make this work. Of course, we have to have our Horizon cycle, right? So, I cannot speak today, guys. Our Peed lands here, okay? We're going to be able to tap for a black or a green, or we can be able to draw cards. More ways to kind of make creatures to be able to sacrifice. Colony Garden. Get a plant. You guys should be familiar with it if you've seen the Titan lists that are running around. Makes a lot of sense. Got a couple of basics. Swamp, double forest. Seems pretty normal. Now, our sideboard here, we've got kind of that nice mix on how we want to go about things. We have some kind of hate cards in here. Dampening Sphere, like we've talked about how that can help out against different decks like Tron, Storm, things like that. Just kind of help slow them down a little bit to allow you to accelerate up to what you need to. Evoker is just like a nice sort of catch-all. I'm going to mess with targeted abilities, but it's a creature, so I could be able to chord for it. I could be able to evolution into it. You know, there's a lot of different things that you can be able to do to help you out. Kitchen Finks. Hey, we're talking about Undying. If you're playing against one of those burn strategies, being able to kind of do some shenanigans with it and just kind of stay alive for a little bit seems like a good way to go about things. Baloth again, hey, I need some life, as well as if your opponent makes you discard it, gets to be able to come onto the battlefield. Seems good. Engineer, just kind of that more creature removal. Seems very solid. You'll see a lot of one-ofs for these sort of lists, And when they're toolbox creature-based strategies, that's why, because you have the ability to find them with Court of Calling, Eldritch Evolution, and Once Upon a Time. So it's easier to have these one-ofs in there. Rec Sage, enchantments, and artifacts getting destroyed when it enters. We've also got a kind of static ability to do that with our thrashing dinosaur over here, a Barantodon with 3/4, which is not too shabby when you think about it. And you can sack and destroy an artifact or enchantment. Our Jailer, I love seeing him or her, them, zombie, wizard back in list again. Cards and graveyards lose all ability. It's 2/1. Again, people have run Grafdigger's Cages and stuff like that, but you don't want Grafdigger's Cage when you're running a core deck. So you need ways to interact with your graveyards and mess with your opponent's graveyards, and being able to tutor something up again with those court effects. Jailer is where it's at. Removal, Abrupt Decay, Assassin's Trophy, Thoughtseize. You're playing against combo style decks, things like that. You want to be able to interact with them a little bit more. And then the protection spell, which, hey, Veil of Summer got banned in Standard. You know, it's good for Modern. I like it. I say that as an Infect player, though, so, you know, take me at a grain of salt with that one. But Veil of Summer here, it's kind of that protection. When you're trying to keep your creatures alive to be in charge of when you kill things, especially if you have a way to protect Yawgmoth, Veil of Summer is kind of where it's at. So overall, that's kind of the way the deck works. Again, if you're trying to beat this deck, being able to get things like Grafdigger's Cage out to prevent them from searching and messing with that like that works really well. If you have graveyard hate, things like Scavenging Ooze, if you have our Leyline of the Void, ways that mess with your opponent's stuff, you know, Rest in Peace, because the Undying is a trigger when they hit the graveyard. When this creature dies, if it has no +1 counters on it, return to the battlefield. So once it dies, goes to the graveyard, Undying trigger goes on the stack, you can interact with that. So you can be able to eat it with Scavenging Ooze, you can be able to mess with it in other ways, and just prevent them from coming back. So if you have ways to do that, helps to shut the deck down. So there are ways to beat this. Don't be too intimidated. But I love that this deck is starting to rise up in popularity again. And it's going to be very interesting to see what other stuff pops up in our 2020 meta. We are going to continue with our videos going forward to let you guys know about other decks that are going to be battling out in the meta. If you guys have not seen some of our previous episodes, you guys can be able to check that out. There'll be links up on the screen for you to be able to see. We're switching over and changing our channel a little bit more and basically just stretching and expanding out. Not only are we going to be continuing with our Magic content and coverage that we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing some more StarCraft related content, which is where the channel originally started from. We're going to continue up with our other games, variety gamings, and that's the stretching that I was talking about. We've got Minecraft series that we are posting up. Sea of Thieves, which will always have a weekly video for you to be able to enjoy. So it's going to be kind of that 4 main games at this point, with a couple of other stuff sprinkled in when I do some Warcraft 3, Warcraft 2, original StarCraft stuff, and just some smatterings of stuff. But those are the main stuff that you can expect to see. If you like the content, please consider following, subscribing. There's, of course, links to all of the other stuff down below for you to be able to enjoy if you're interested in what the Twitch channel is, Patreon, all of that great stuff. But that's going to do it for us here tonight, guys. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and I'll see you guys next game.